Welcome to the deep dive. Ever catch yourself thinking, if something isn't absolutely perfect, it's a total disaster?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe that one little setback means complete and utter failure.
Right. That kind of mental toggle switch, we could call it. That's what we're exploring today. All or nothing thinking.
Ah, yeah. I've heard it called black and white thinking too, or polarized.
Exactly. Polarized thinking, dichotomous thinking, lots of names. But the core idea is the same. Seeing things in only two extreme categories, you completely miss all the shades of gray in between.
Okay, so it's like life becomes a series of pass-fail tests
Right.
with nothing in the middle.
Precisely. And, this isn't just a casual perspective thing. It can be a really deeply ingrained thought pattern, and it has, well, real impacts.
So today we're going to dig into that.
Yeah, over the next little while, we'll delve into why our brains sometimes default to these extremes. And more importantly, we want to equip you with some practical strategies, ways to step back from that rigid either view.
Sounds good. What's the aim then?
The goal is pretty straightforward. Help you recognize this pattern in yourself, maybe ease some associated anxiety or pessimism, and, ultimately contribute to a more balanced sense of well-being overall.
Okay, so this all or nothing thinking, it sounds pretty fundamental. How does it fit into the bigger picture of how our minds work? I hear the term cognitive distortions thrown around a lot. What's the deal with those?
That's a great starting point. Think of cognitive distortions as sort of mental shortcuts, patterns of thought that aren't always, strictly speaking, based on facts.
Shortcuts that can lead you down the wrong path.
Yeah, exactly. They can kind of twist how we interpret things, often making us see the world or ourselves more negatively than the reality warrants. And all or nothing thinking. It's a classic example. A really common distortion that often underlies negative self-talk and can really drag down our mood.
So it's like our brain has these, I don't know, default settings that sometimes glick out on us.
That's a good way to put it. Paige Dyer, she's a licensed marriage and family therapist. She describes it as seeing only two possibilities, just the two extreme ends of a spectrum, with absolutely nothing in the middle ground.
As if all the nuance just gets edited out.
Right. And as Dyer also points out, this isn't just some abstract mental exercise. Our thoughts. They have a direct, powerful influence on our emotions, on how we feel, and then consequently on how we behave.
Yeah, that really resonates. It's easy to imagine how constantly living in those extremes, total success or total failure, all good or all bad, could just completely wear you down.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this isn't just like a minor bad habit, is it? The sources we looked at suggest it's actually connected to some significant mental health issues.
That's a really crucial point. Research consistently shows a pretty significant link between this kind of thinking and a whole range of challenges. We're talking anxiety disorders, depression, substance use disorders, eating disorders.
Quite a list.
Yeah, PTSD, even certain personality disorders. It just highlights how pervasive and, well, influential this cognitive style can be. What's really interesting, or maybe concerning, is that this rigid thinking can sometimes worsen the very symptoms of these conditions.
That's quite eye-opening. It really makes you wonder how often this pattern is cropping up in just everyday life, maybe without us even realizing it. Can we walk through some concrete examples, make it less abstract?
Absolutely. Let's start with self-perception, how we judge ourselves. All or nothing thinking often fuels this really harsh, unforgiving kind of perfectionism.
The perfectionism trap.
Right? It's that mindset of, if I don't get an A on every single exam, then I'm just a complete failure. There's just no room for acknowledging effort or partial success or even just areas for growth. It's pass-fail on the achievement scale.
Yeah, that one definitely hits close to home. It feels like if you make one tiny mistake, the whole thing's ruined.
Yeah.
And I can totally see how this plays out with, say, body image, especially with social media bombarding us with these perfect, often retouched images.
Oh, absolutely. Someone scrolling sees these heavily filtered photos, and the immediate thought might be, my body doesn't look like that, so I hate my body. Full stop.
Or the opposite, right?
Or the
Yeah.
flip side, this kind of unrealistic idealization. If I just looked exactly like that person, then I'd finally love myself. It's what Paige Dyer highlights, this stark black and white comparison. There's no middle ground allowed.
Like what?
I actually like my eyes, but I'd maybe like to work on my fitness. That kind of nuanced view, it just doesn't compute in the all or nothing framework. It's either total acceptance based on an impossible standard or total rejection.
It's just so restrictive. It feels like you're setting yourself up for constant disappointment.
Mm.
What about how this affects our drive? our motivation, what we actually manage to get done.
That's another really key area. This all-or-nothing mentality can be a huge roadblock for motivation. It often leads straight to procrastination or finding excuses to just not try.
How so?
Well, think of someone looking at a big to-do list and thinking, I can't possibly finish everything today, so I might as well do nothing.
Right, the why bother feeling.
Or, my alarm didn't go off exactly on time, my morning routine is shot, so the whole day is basically ruined, I'll just cancel that meeting. It's that switch, one small thing goes off plan, and the entire effort gets scrapped.
Yeah, it's that classic, well, I already ate one cookie, so I might as well eat the whole box kind of logic. It definitely sounds like a recipe for getting stuck. And I can really imagine this becoming amplified when someone's feeling low or perhaps dealing with depression.
Oh, absolutely. For individuals experiencing depression, all-or-nothing thinking can really intensify those feelings of hopelessness. It often works in tandem with other distortions, like catastrophizing, imagining the absolute worst, or overgeneralizing from one bad event.
What might that sound like?
You might hear thoughts like, I never feel happy, I always feel sad, or everything in my life is terrible, nothing good ever happens. And just this crushing sense that it's always going to be this way. Wow.
Dyer really emphasizes that when you're in that state, feeling that hopelessness, you feel utterly stuck. It becomes incredibly hard to even conceive of any other possibilities, any shades of gray. Those examples really paint a picture of how this thinking deepens despair, like being caught in this negative feedback loop with no visible exit. I was also really struck by the potential connection to trauma, especially things experienced in childhood.
Yes, that's an important link. There can be a significant connection between developing this thinking style and experiencing past trauma, particularly during childhood. Traumatic events can fundamentally shape how we process information, how we make sense of a chaotic world.
And for kids?
Well, children, with their cognitive abilities still developing, might lean heavily on this kind of black and white thinking as a way to sort of impose some order on overwhelming or frightening situations.
Can you give an example?
For instance, a child experiencing family turmoil might internalize it and think, it's all my fault. If I had just been better behaved, none of this would be happening. They take complete, absolute responsibility, viewing themselves as either the good kid who prevents disaster or the bad kid who causes it.
That's incredibly poignant. It's like their young minds are desperately trying to find a reason, any reason, to feel some sense of control, even if that reason is inaccurate and self-blaming. And it's not a huge leap to see how this rigid thinking could spill over and cause trouble in our relationships with other people, too.
Definitely. All-or-nothing patterns can really put a strain on interpersonal dynamics. They foster unrealistic expectations of ourselves and others, and they really limit the space for understanding, forgiveness, and growth in relationships.
How does that show up?
You might hear those absolute statements like, you never ask how I'm feeling, or you always raise your voice. These are definitive pronouncements, right? They completely erase any instances where the person did ask or didn't raise their voice.
Yeah, ignores the exceptions.
Exactly. And as Dyer notes, this limits your ability to even see the exceptions. It reinforces this negative expectation. If you're convinced someone always acts a certain way, you're almost primed to overlook times when they don't, and well, that belief can become a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy in the relationship.
It's like we put on these incredibly narrow blinkers, filtering out anything that doesn't fit our pre-existing black and white judgment of the person or the situation. Okay, this is all incredibly helpful for understanding the problem, but what can we actually do about it? How do we start to, loosen the grip of this all-or-nothing thinking?
Well, the really encouraging news is that these thought patterns aren't set in stone. We absolutely can learn to shift them. The very first step, and it's crucial, is simply becoming more aware. Noticing when these extreme judgments, these rigid categories, are actually popping up in our thoughts.
Just noticing them.
Noticing is the start. And then there are several practical techniques we can use to actively challenge and change them.
Okay, I'm ready. What are some concrete steps we can take? Let's break it down.
All right, first step, and this is really foundational. Mastering metacognition.
Metacognition. Sounds complex.
It sounds fancy, but it basically just means thinking about your thinking, intentionally paying attention to your own thought processes, becoming a kind of mindful observer of your internal chatter, right?
Yeah.
You want to listen specifically for those telltale absolute words, always, never, completely, Total disaster, perfect failure. Notice when your internal story is painting things in those stark, polarized terms.
And beyond the words.
It's also super helpful to identify when this thinking kicks in most often. Are there specific situations, social settings, work pressure? Is it worse in the morning or maybe when you're stressed or tired? Knowing your triggers is key.
Got it. So step one is become a detective of your own mind, spot the patterns. What's strategy number two?
Second tip, preparing for bad days. This ties directly into emotional regulation.
Emotional regulation, managing feelings.
Exactly. It's our ability to recognize our emotions, understand them, and then respond to them in, well, healthy and adaptive ways rather than letting them hijack our thinking.
How does that help with all and nothing thinking?
Well, if we develop this skill, we're better equipped to handle those challenging moments that might otherwise send us spiraling into black and white conclusions. A practical way to do this is to proactively identify and practice some self-soothing techniques.
Like what?
Things you can consciously turn to when you feel stressed or notice yourself defaulting to those extremes. Deep breathing, stepping away for a moment, mindfulness exercises, whatever works for you. Having a plan.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Having some preloaded coping strategies could definitely act as a buffer against those really impulsive all or nothing judgments. Okay, what's technique number three?
Number 3 is all about exploring yes and. This is a really fantastic technique for broadening that binary thinking and building more cognitive flexibility.
Yes, and. How does that work?
When you catch yourself in an all or nothing thought, this project was a complete failure, you consciously try to add a yes and to introduce nuance.
Give me an example.
Okay, so instead of this project was a complete failure, you could try, yes, some parts didn't go as planned, and I also learned a lot and got some positive feedback on the initial proposal. Or maybe, yes, I'm feeling disappointed, and I can identify specific things to do differently next time.
Ah, I see. It acknowledges the negative bit, but it adds another perspective.
Exactly. It forces you to acknowledge complexity, to move away from those rigid, simplistic either boxes. Yes, I made a mistake, and that doesn't make me a terrible person.
I really like that one. It feels like it creates some mental breathing room, acknowledging that reality is usually much messier than just black or white. What's our fourth strategy?
Fourth strategy involves asking and reframing. Now, reframing is a real cornerstone of therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT.
Right, I've heard of CBT.
It's where you learn to identify those automatic negative thoughts, the ones that just pop into your head, and then actively work to challenge and replace them with more balanced, more realistic alternatives.
So questioning the thought.
Questioning it, examining it. In some therapies, like trauma-focused CBT, a big part is analyzing these negative automatic thoughts. How accurate is this thought, really? How helpful is it?
And the goal.
The goal isn't necessarily to jump straight to positive thinking, which can feel fake. It's often about shifting to a slightly more accurate or more helpful or even just a more neutral thought, because even that small shift can lead to different emotions, different behaviors, and ultimately you start to assign a different meaning to the situation.
So it's about actively challenging those initial gut reactions and making a conscious effort to find a more nuanced viewpoint. Okay, makes sense. And the final piece of advice.
The fifth, and this is really important, is reaching out for professional support. Therapy can be such a valuable space. It offers a safe, confidential environment to really dig into these ingrained thought patterns. You can work on developing healthier ways of thinking with the guidance of someone trained to help with exactly this kind of thing. A therapist can offer strategies tailored specifically to you and help you understand your own mind much more deeply.
That's a vital reminder. We don't always have to figure this stuff out entirely on our own. Sometimes getting that experienced perspective can make all the difference. Now, just before we wrap things up, I noticed our sources mentioned a few other related terms, things that sound similar.
Yes, absolutely. It can be helpful to see how all or nothing thinking connects to some other related concepts in psychology. It gives you a broader picture. For instance, you sometimes hear the term splitting.
Splitting, okay, what's that?
It's often used, particularly when talking about relationships, to describe essentially the same phenomenon. That tendency to see people or situations, or even oneself, in these extreme black or white terms, good or bad, angel or devil, with no room for complexity or ambiguity.
Ah, okay. So splitting is basically another label for the same core pattern, maybe with a specific focus.
Pretty much, yes. Then there's emotional reasoning.
Emotional reasoning.
This is another cognitive distortion where we make the mistake of assuming our feelings are direct reflections of reality. The classic example is thinking, I feel stupid, therefore I must be stupid.
Oh, right. Confusing feelings with facts.
Exactly. And you can easily see how this fuels all or nothing thinking, right? It creates these rigid emotional boxes. Either I feel completely good, therefore everything must be perfect, or I feel awful, therefore everything must be terrible. There's no space for feeling, say, disappointed but still competent.
That's a really clear link. It's like our feelings become this totally unreliable measuring stick for the whole world. And what about catastrophizing? That one seems to pop up a lot with negative thinking patterns.
Right. Catastrophizing is when we jump to the absolute worst possible outcome and fixate on it as if it's practically guaranteed to
The
happen.
sky is falling.
Kind of, yeah. And all or nothing thinking can absolutely pour fuel on that fire. If you're already thinking in extremes, success or failure, safety or disaster, it becomes much easier to leap to the most extreme negative conclusion and see it as inevitable.
It's like one negative thought triggers a domino effect, each one getting more extreme. And I also saw a mention of something called a thought record. What's that about? Is it like a diary?
It's a bit more structured than a diary.
Yeah.
The thought record is a really practical tool, often used in CBT and other therapies, designed to help us become more consciously aware of the links between specific situations, our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors.
How does it work?
Typically, it involves writing things down in columns. You'd note the situation or trigger that set things off, then your feelings and maybe rate their intensity, then the actual unhelpful thoughts or images that went through your mind.
Okay.
Then, and this is key, you list facts that support that unhelpful thought, but also facts that contradict it or offer evidence against it.
Challenging the thought directly.
Exactly. Then you work on formulating a more balanced alternative perspective. And finally, you look at the outcome. How do you feel after going through this process? Maybe you re-rate the intensity of those initial emotions.
That sounds like a really concrete, hands-on way to actually practice some of these management techniques we've been talking about.
It is. By writing it down, you're kind of forcing yourself to slow down and really examine those automatic thoughts that might otherwise just flash by without scrutiny. It takes it from being just this vague internal feeling and makes it something tangible you can analyze, learn from, and actively work to change.
Well, this has been a really, really insightful deep dive into the world of all-or-nothing thinking. It seems pretty clear that while it might be a common mental shortcut, it often doesn't really serve us well. It can lead to a much more negative, much more limited experience of ourselves and the world.
Absolutely. And the key takeaway, I think, is that recognizing this pattern in your own thoughts, just becoming aware and then consciously applying some of the strategies we talked about, well, that can genuinely pave the way for a more balanced, more realistic, and ultimately a more positive outlook.
It's about challenging the extremes.
Right. By becoming more mindful, questioning those automatic black and white judgments, you really can lessen the intensity of negative feelings and build up more resilience for navigating, the messy, complex reality of life.
So a final thought for everyone listening.
Mm-hmm.
As you go about your day, maybe just try to notice, is there a situation where you might be falling into that all-or-nothing trap? And if you spot one, what's just one small yes and you could introduce, just to create a tiny bit more nuance, a little more gray area in your perspective?
It sounds small, but those small shifts can really add up.
Definitely. It has the potential to make a really significant difference over time. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.